The film Black Hawk Down tells how the operation of the U.S. Armed Forces in Somalia ended in a catastrophic failure. The negative perception of this failure in American society has led to the fact that since the 1990s and 2000s, the U.S. command has always used carpet bombing at the beginning of all subsequent conflicts in order to avoid useless losses of its soldiers and not to irritate the American public. Somalia is located in a good place on the Horn of Africa. In the country, for a long time, there was a struggle for influence between the USSR and the USA after the overthrow of the Socialist Party in Somalia. However, after the collapse of the USSR, the Somali Socialist Party lost financial and military support from Moscow, and in 1991 it was overthrown by armed opposition forces. This led to chaos in the country, civil war, and lack of centralized authority. The result of all this was a terrible famine, which, according to various estimates, claimed the lives of more than 300,000 people in April 1992. The United Nations came to the aid of Somalia. In 1992, the UN Security Council established a humanitarian mission, which initially set the task of ensuring the safe delivery and equitable distribution of humanitarian assistance to the regions most in need. However, most of the food did not reach the needy, but was plundered by local clans. In this regard, it was decided to send peacekeepers to Somalia to ensure the protection and escort of humanitarian cargo. On December 3, 1992, the United States and other countries passed a resolution that allowed the international forces going to Somalia to use all necessary means to ensure stability in the region. This operation was code-named Restore Hope. The UN contingent, which consisted of representatives of more than 20 countries, including the United States, included about 37,000 people. However, most of the food did not reach the needy, but was plundered by local clans. In this regard, it was decided to send peacekeepers to Somalia to ensure the protection and escort of humanitarian cargo. On December 3, 1992, the United States and other countries passed a resolution that allowed the international forces going to Somalia to use all necessary means to ensure stability in the region. This operation was code-named Restore Hope. The UN contingent, which consisted of representatives of more than 20 countries, including the United States, included about 37,000 people. One of the key figures in this war was Mohammed Fawaideed, the former chief of staff of the Somali army. Aidid formed a strong group of like-minded people and received the support of Islamic radical movements, which allowed him to seize control over some parts of the country. Interestingly, at the initial stage of the operation, American soldiers successfully completed their assigned tasks and managed to eliminate many rebel groups in Somalia. The country even had a government recognized by the UN. However, the main problem was that this government persistently refused to recognize general aid and sought to seize power. In response to this, the Americans constantly attacked the positions of the rebels. During these attacks, the local population became increasingly hostile to the U.S. Army. Since there was not enough distinction between militants and civilians during the attacks, civilian casualties were regarded as simply minor collateral casualties. In one example, a few months before the events depicted in the film, on July 12, 1993, American troops launched rocket and bomb attacks on several buildings in Mogadishu. This attack killed 60 civilians. In this regard, an increasing number of Somalis supported Mohammed Fawaideed and opposed the American soldiers, developing a real guerrilla war. The film quite accurately shows that the U.S. military reacted to the operation of keeping 2 associates and a guide too casually. They did not attach much importance to this, believing that it would not last long and would not bring them any problems. However, the film does not show previous failed attempts during which the Rangers encountered no resistance. It was these failed attempts that led to such negligence. The rebels deployed hundreds of observers on rooftops near the American base and gradually studied how American task forces responded to various unusual situations according to protocols. In addition, specialists received many signals indicating that their sources in the capital of Somalia were uncovered or were not competent enough. Moreover, these sources provided outdated information or simply disinformation. This also played a role in the failure of the operation. The Somali fighters carefully studied the Rangers' plan of action, including helicopter landings and protecting convoys. Therefore, they prepared in advance and had RPGs to attack helicopters. However, the U.S. Army, for unclear reasons, did not consider their helicopters vulnerable. By the way, 2 weeks before the operation, an event occurred that could have attracted attention and become a warning, but it was ignored. It is also not shown in the film that this warning signal sounded as early as September 2015, when the rebels pulled in a light reconnaissance helicopter, which appeared to be a jeep on fire, and fired a grenade from an old Soviet RP-7 at this helicopter. However, the commander of the Rangers, General Garrison, considered this an accident and did not draw any conclusions about the use of RPGs by the militants. The helicopter pilots were not warned of the possibility of being shot down by conventional RPGs. The operation began, as depicted in the film, on October 3, 1993, when intelligence information located Omar Salad and Abdik San, two important associates of General Aidid. Both field commanders were hiding in the buildings of the Olympic Hotel, which was located in the Bikara market itself. The film also shows how the local agent could not point to the right building for a long time, but in fact he got even more confused. The agent from the locals was supposed to indicate the location of the building for the reconnaissance aircraft, but it turned out that he was frightened and could not drive up to the right house. It was explained to him that such behavior is unacceptable, and after a while the agent went by car through the Bikar area. At this time, video camera operators from the reconnaissance aircraft were watching him. The agent stopped in front of the house where the leaders of the militants were and simulated a breakdown by opening the hood. It was a conditional signal by which they had to determine the desired building. The agent only simulated a breakdown, but not for long. The operators did not have time to fix the coordinates of the house. The agent was ordered to start all over again, and only on the third attempt was he able to point to the right building. In Somalia, U.S. intelligence often had to rely on unreliable people and unverified information. Local superagents had no religious background. At 1532, helicopters with Rangers and a Delta took off from a base in the city, as shown in the film. The Air Force approached Mogadishu from the ocean, and a large evacuation team went to the city by land transport. The landing party expected to cope with the task in 30 minutes. The plan was to surround the 3-story building and then land the Delta troops directly onto the roof to enter the building and lock onto targets as soon as the helicopters hovered over the point. The Rangers were divided into 4 groups, each of which controlled one corner of the building. However, difficulties immediately arose. In conditions where locals were burning tires, and dirt and dust from helicopters were rising everywhere, it was difficult to see the roofs of buildings. Despite this, the ropes were thrown out, and Eversmith descended the rope to the middle when he saw the body of a soldier below him. This event was a young soldier named Blackman. At first, they thought that they were under fire, and due to the loss of one of the fighters, the detachment could not continue to move. However, after examining the victim, the doctor said that Blackman was not injured, but somehow fell out of the helicopter. At 1600 hours, 24 Somalis were captured, including 2 of Aidid's closest supporters. 3 vehicles of the convoy headed towards the building, while 4 were withdrawn for evacuation. At first, the Americans met little resistance, and the task was quickly completed. However, the Somali National Alliance forces appeared on the scene much more quickly than before, and a large crowd of civilians also gathered. The militants covered themselves with local women and children, using them as human shields. As a result, the first helicopter was shot down and crashed in the quarters to the northeast of the target, with 6 fighters on board. The command was forced to change the plan of operation on the move, and the reconnaissance units that planned to withdraw with the convoy were forced to split up. Some of the fighters began to move towards the scene of the accident, while the rest continued to act according to the original plan. 2 guarded airborne gunners were evacuated from the crash site by another reconnaissance helicopter. A perimeter defense was set up around the accident site, which the Rangers gradually joined. The number of militants in the fall zone began to increase constantly, and a fierce firefight unfolded with heavy losses on both sides. Sergeant Eversman described what happened as gunshots so loud they hurt his teeth. He had never experienced such a sensation from the rumble that filled the battlefield. The soldiers fought to the last, and with these people, they were not going to stop fighting. They could only be stopped by bullets. At 16:40, the second helicopter received a direct hit from an RPG grenade in the tail boom and was forced to land at the base. In flight, the tail rotor finally collapsed, and the helicopter crashed in the city. The crew found themselves cut off from the main ground forces due to the long distance and the high risk of losing a third helicopter that could have provided them with support. 2 snipers, Randy Shugard and Gary Gorin, were called in to assist the victims. They found seriously injured but alive crew members, including pilot Michael Durant. Snipers organized a circular defense, shooting at hundreds of armed Somalis. It is officially believed that Shugard died first. However, in the book of the writer Mark Bogdan, it is suggested that Gordon was the first to die. In May 1994, both snipers were posthumously awarded the highest honor. These were the first presentations of this award since it was introduced during the Vietnam War. The only survivor of the crew, pilot Michael Durant, was taken prisoner, and all the rest were killed during this collision. Propaganda Minister Gen. Adi Abdullah Hazen watched the situation while Durant was released after 11 days of detention and handed over to the Red Cross. The main body of the evacuation team was stranded in a maze of streets, suffering heavy losses from crossfire from gunners on the roofs and windows of the buildings. The lack of orientation to the terrain and blocked streets exacerbated the situation. After significant losses, the column was forced to return to its original position. It was decided to withdraw the column from the city back to the base, leaving 99 Rangers and Delta fighters in the city, surrounded in the area where the first helicopter fell. 2 hours after the start of the operation, another rapid response convoy set off for the crash site of the second helicopter, but it was blocked and could not reach its target. Major General Garrison ordered the return to base at nightfall. There were many wounded fighters left in the city, and attempts to save the wounded Corporal Jimmy Smith became an emotionally charged moment. Ultimately, American soldiers were evacuated from Mogadishu, especially with the support of the UN military. The Mogadishu Mile became famous as a symbol of battle and victory in this operation. The Mogadishu operation radically changed the attitude of the Americans to the military conflict in Somalia. Although the purpose of the raid was achieved, the price paid by 18 dead and about 80 wounded was too high. Shocking footage of triumphant militants carrying the torn body of a dead fighter caused a wide response in American society. As a result, the American command changed its approach to subsequent peacekeeping operations in Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and other regions. They began to undertake operations using carpet bombing to avoid the loss of American soldiers' lives and minimize the risks. The operation in Mogadishu was of significant importance to the civilian army. This experience served as a guide for subsequent peacekeeping missions. She showed that it is necessary to take into account the complexity of the terrain, correctly plan operations, and provide the necessary support for soldiers on the battlefield.